Hello and welcome. I'm Lucia Rahilly, Editorial Director at McKinsey & Company, and your host for this series of live webinars sponsored by the Global Thought Leadership Institute at APQC. Quick note before we start, this series is designed to give you the opportunity to engage with a range of experts and practitioners in the field of thought leadership today. We hold these webinars on a monthly cadence, and you can see our roster by following the GTLI on LinkedIn. Go to LinkedIn right now and follow the GTLI, or by visiting APQC's website at apqc.org/GTLI. You can also take a look at past webinars on our YouTube channel by searching for @GTLI-APQC. As always, we would love for this session to be as interactive as possible. We want to make this genuinely audience back and useful to all of you who have joined us here today. So we invite you to please send along your questions using the Zoom chat functionality, and I will do my best to field as many of them as possible. Today, Kate Vitasek, Distinguished Fellow at the Global Supply Chain Institute at the University of Tennessee's Haslam College of Business. Kate comes at thought leadership slightly differently from some of the other folks we've featured in this series. Many of us are enabling the production and dissemination of research-driven content for SMEs within relatively large organizations. Kate is both an academic and a practitioner. She is the author of, countless, like scores of publications, including articles, 8 books, blog posts, keynotes, and more. And frankly, she's a very consistent and reliable voice and advocate on our GTLI advisory board for the individual thought leader, at least the smaller thought leadership players in our midst, which hopefully includes some of you in our audience today. She's here to talk to us about how to translate research-driven insights into real business impact. That's something that all of us aspire to do in theory, but that can be challenging in practice, and maybe particularly challenging from the smaller player point of view without the sort of heft of a large organization that has resources and scale and that can bring real world implementation capabilities to market. So Kate, welcome, and thank you so much for being together with us today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to come and share the awesome stuff that we're doing at the University of Tennessee and how we disseminate some of our work. You know, as an individual professor out there, how do you get your ideas out in the world?
Yeah, I think it's super important, as you always as you always surface in our GTLI discussions, because so many folks out there, thousands of folks on LinkedIn, identify as thought leaders, right? But we often think of whether it's McKinsey or Deloitte or Accenture, KPMG, all these big organizations versus these smaller players. So let's just start with some context. As you have said, every year we see universities investing in like literally billions of dollars of research and developing analysis, and yet so much of that insight that results from this academic work remains in the realm of theory versus being implemented in the real world in practice. So talk to us about why. Like, why do you think that gap persists, and what are some of the barriers that you see that keeps that content from, maybe not from reaching business leaders? I'm not sure. It may reach business leaders, but maybe doesn't affect their behavior in a practical or meaningful or measurable way.
Well, I think that you have to understand that academics are academics and they're out there doing research and they're not always rewarded for getting their ideas out of the box, right? And so many universities actually hold up on a pedestal being able to publish in academic journals. And so there's no reward system saying, hey, that's awesome. You were in a trade publication. That's considered, you know, junk work.
Right.
But why don't we take this academic work and translate it into something that individuals out there that, especially in the business world, maybe in the medical research or other areas, but in the world of business where I live, I think there's a real need to take the research, the great research, and translate it back into practical stuff. And that's something the University of Tennessee in particular is very, very, very good at, and especially in the supply chain space. So I'm in the supply chain function, and so we're number one in the world in graduate and executive education, and number two in undergraduate. And so if you think about graduate and executive education, my students are grown-ups. They're the business people in the world who have real problems. And so it's very critical for someone like me who teaches exec ed and graduate education to make our stuff applied.
Yeah.
But that's not true for all universities and all types of research that's out there. And I think, at least we recognize there's a huge need to make academic research more practical and applied.
So, I want to follow up on your comments on exec ed, but before we do, let's get a little more specific about what you've done so differently at the University of Tennessee to make these wonky or complex academic topics like supply chain or even, niches within supply chain simpler to access, simpler to use for business leaders and to bridge that divide between theory and practice.
Well, I think one of the big things that we do is the research that we do, we try to take and make it accessible. So instead of an academic journal, I mean, we still have academic journals, don't get me wrong. So we're publishing for our peers out there to go, yes, your work is really good. My work in particular, the work of some of my colleagues in the Global Supply Chain Institute, tries to do white papers. And so white papers are more practitioner friendly. We try to really go out in the trade press. For example, Harvard Business Review, you have a HBR article. That's getting that message, getting that research and translating it into something that is going to be easily digestible and not, stuck in language or words that are only read by other academics. When's the last time you read the journal of, supply chain and logistics, or name the 10 letter acronym on the journal, article. And so practitioners don't read those.
But to your point on HBR versus trades, for example. So I don't necessarily consider HBR a trade. And I know in our context, there's trades can really reach the community that you're trying to access. But everyone's first pass is, can we get this into HBR?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I think
So,
I'll write an op-ed
so
for the
I
FT.
bet I had 300 articles before I landed an HBR article. So I just got to toss that out. So if you look at it, you've got academic journals, very rigorous research, right? And then you have the next level down, the HBRs, the McKinsey Quarterly, right? That mecca of like, this is a great publication. And then you have the real trade press, something like, the Cornet, the corporate real estate, magazine, contract management magazine,
Yeah,
supply chain management quarterly, supply chain management review, supply chain quarterly, that are published by by the associations or just in general trade press, right? And so we've gone after the trade press. I had tons and tons of articles before I ever got an HBR article.
yeah,
And so you kind of grade them. And I don't know if you know that, but in academic world, there's you actually kind of grades for different things. And so the better the grade of the journal, even journals are graded and magazines are graded. And so the typical academic is rewarded by getting into A journals. In an A journal like this, oh, this is a very research intensive, my peers are going to love this, right? And so we kind of, especially I've kind of flipped that model and said, well, that's great, but why shouldn't we be trying to disseminate our work? To the point of all of our white papers, the ones that I work on, and pretty much all the ones at the Global Supply Chain Institute, they're all open source, they're free. And this is one of the things that y'all really tried to let GTLI looked at was how to, not having gates. And so we believe on that, like, hey, go and download. We want it everywhere. My work is actually on purpose in the Creative Commons. I want you to do this. I
Yeah.
want universities to take our work and institutionalize it. So any university who wants to use one of our case studies, and I've had 25 case studies with amazing case studies, BP, JLL, Dell, FedEx, Intel, DHL, different ones. Anyone can download for free our case studies and use them. And a professor can reach out and I will even give them slides.
Yeah.
Here's slides so you can go teach this to your students because that's how you drive change. So if you've got a good idea that you've researched at the university, don't let it get stuck in the walls of other academics of your university or even in those trade journals, getting those out. And I think that's, I'm very proud of the College of Business, especially around what we're doing in supply chain because of the practical applied nature.
So, in hearing you speak, it who's your audience? So you're describing reaching other academics who can then or having slides available for other academics so they can reach their students who might include, young people who are next gen supply chain practitioners, as well as exec ed folks who are, who are
Mhm.
already supply chain practitioners. So you're talking about academics who are teaching and sort of scaling and cascading that way. And you're also talking about like HBR, which is going to a big audience, and then it sort of a lot in between as well. So how do you think about audience and how do you recommend smaller players think about audience? Because practitioners often operate at a different level of detail than C-suite leaders, for example, who have to have things abstracted because they're not in the nitty-gritty of the day-to-day.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a great question. So I like to think of it as here's your idea. And
Mm-hmm.
so off of that idea, you want to reach different players. And so with the same idea, you would just take that concept and write a different form factor. So I have a book that's, 70,000 words. Not many people read books these days, by the way, right? But we do. We've sold a lot of books. So for
Yeah.
books, then we have white papers, then we have an HBR article on the same concept, and then I have trade press. So it's getting the idea and then looking at the people, the various audience you said, and that idea will be the piece of thought leadership that gets generated for a certain audience will be different, but the idea is the same. The research that supported that idea was identical.
Yeah.
So
That
I'll take, for example, yeah,
talking about spinning off a variety of assets from the same, like
exactly right.
conducting that substantive, rigorous piece of research and then spinning it off into multiple different kinds of assets to reach different audiences. Is that right?
Yeah, because the academic in another university who's just trying to teach a case study, I just need one case study for my semester. Or I'm doing a whole class. I got a call from a professor at Northeastern University, and they were, supply chain is now in vogue, post-pandemic, and
Yeah.
they wanted to create a new strategic sourcing class. They had not taught strategic sourcing before, and they thought, this is a good thing. And so he reached out and he simply did a Google of the different, sourcing books, found my book and reached out. And I said, hey, here's all the slides for an entire semester. But we have
Mhm.
others that just want one little case study. And
Yeah.
so you really have to, and the way I look at it is different users need different things. It's all coming back to the ideas and the research that we've done. So
Yeah.
it's a dissemination problem on how you reach people that need the type of stuff that they need. You know, because
Mhm.
the practitioner, as you said, we do a ton of tools. So one of the things on our website, when you go to thevestedway.com to you know learn more about the work and research we've done on trading partner relationships, we have an open source toolkit. And so practitioners, those people in the weeds, love the toolkit. A C-suite person isn't going to come and look at the tools. They're like, yeah, right, whatever. They want the HBR article,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
If I'm a professor,
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a professor, I want that long teaching case.
Mhm.
But, you know, if I just want to glance, I have a short teaching, yeah, a little short 4-page case study. So we really try to, at least the work that I'm doing on trading partner relationships, my goal is to get that dissemination. It's not just to do the research, because if you just do the research, a good idea can go the good idea graveyard, right? I want people to use the work. So the thing that gets me super excited is when companies like BP and JLL use the vested methodology, and then I turn around and I get to study them, write a case study. So if we're out there, it's like a nice little circle, right? So we have the original research, people are applying it. Now I go study them. Gosh, how did that work in practice? What could we have done differently? Then improve my teaching assets, my case studies, my white papers, my tools, and we started all over again doing more and more companies. So the more companies that apply makes us smarter.
Right, 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 right. That's very similar to our experience, right? Where the combination within a company like McKinsey, where the combination of research and client work generates more research and client work in
Exactly.
combination with like exogenous forces that are changing industry dynamics or whatever, changing trends.
Right.
Um,
And I don't think of it as client work, right? I think of it as someone's applying our concepts that lets us come back and do the research. So same thing with a different lens.
how do you connect the journey there? So how do you know that someone from BP has picked up your research and then applied it? And then how do you feed that back? Like, how does an individual practitioner or an academic practitioner who doesn't view these companies as clients and isn't tracking the impact of their client engagement in the same way, how do you connect that and measure that impact?
Well, it's interesting, right? So people read our books, read an HB article, and we get calls.
Yeah,
Hey, I'm interested in this, and we have courses, right? So we have, I've got 10 courses in our Certified to Architect program. So some may just be coming to take our vested orientation, which is a 5-hour online only class. And when they register for that or register for a foundation certificate, I'm going, hey, I see you're interested in this. And so they begin to take our classes, and that's how we know folks. In the case of BP, the head of facilities and real estate management, someone told her to call me. And so I get this phone call, and she goes, I'm really interested. Someone's told me about your research. Can you come and do a workshop for us?
yeah,
And because we do exec ed, okay, fine, love to come do a workshop for you. And we know that they're doing stuff. Now, very interesting. I just got a call from a Canadian company, the CEO of a Canadian company, and he read my book, the Vested Outsourcing book in 2015, had his whole company read it. He's applied the concepts just from reading the book. And here
yeah,
it is, 2025. I get a call and he goes, Kate, we love Vested. This has worked so well. And I'm like, this is awesome. I want to know more. Right. And so we just seeing people at conferences, different things. But, almost 12,000 people have taken one or more of our classes.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so as they go through and take our certification program, we're tracking those people, not tracking those people, but they become part of our graduates who come back and they tell us about what they're doing. We get to write case studies on them, right?
Yeah, that is super interesting. And, you know, we have seen this proliferation of exec ed programs over the past couple of decades, I would say, right? More and more universities are offering exec ed programs. Do you find that to be a helpful way of connecting with actual business practitioners and kind of informing that virtuous cycle that you describe? Because not everyone, I mean, that might be an opportunity for thought leaders to try to be on the faculty in exec ed programs.
Yeah, and actually we do that. We hire, practitioners, former executives to come in because of the practitioner kind of friendly environment that we have. But yes, so the exec ed absolutely is very integral because we take our research and we want to teach it. So
Yeah,
we don't want to write about it. We want people to do it. And so
yeah,
we have our practitioner program. But we also have, for example, in the Global Supply Chain Institute, we have a forum. And so companies join our forum, and twice a year they come to the UT campus and we're sharing information back and forth. We're talking about our latest research. There are actually 10 to 12 companies every year participate in our supply chain collaborative research, which is where the companies themselves say, we have this problem. Will you facilitate a research project around us? And they will jointly fund that particular topic.
yeah.
And
That,
so in my case, my research is all based on the topic that I want, trading partner relationships. But in the case of the supply chain forum, and it's the company led research.
yeah.
Hey, there's something out here we want to look at. Facilitate this with us, and they all pitch in, and we then go, great, this is a great topic. Love to do some research on that.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. There was a question here and now I don't see it, or I can't put my finger on it, but there was a question that relates a little bit to the academy um, versus client bifurcation that we were talking about. Um, which was like something along the lines, forgive me to the person who asked it, something along the lines of how much trust do you put into commercial entities that publish these kinds of research findings, and how do you gauge them relative to university-driven findings, which is a great question now that every commercial entity is getting into the thought leadership game. So I'm interested in how you view that.
Yeah, I think that in general, I mean, I can't speak for all universities, but in general, universities and academics put a lot of rigor into the work that we do.
Yeah.
And so in general, I think there's a general sweeping statement. You
Mm.
can tend to trust that more
Mhm.
because we're trained in doing research. And this
Right.
is one reason I'm so passionate about what the Thought Leadership Institute's doing, because creating those standards. A lot of the smaller organizations that aren't the McKinseys and the EYs and the Accentures and the IBMs, they don't have the big army behind them, and they haven't been trained in what good, rigorous thought leadership looks like. And
Mhm.
so even if you're, a small independent entrepreneur out there trying to do something, you need to be producing high quality thought leadership. And so if you only do one thing a year or two times a year, it's better to do one thing a year and do it really well than do 10 things that are not good. And so I'm a big fan of the standards. And I think naturally, if you look at what we do at the university, any university tends to put a little bit more rigor in because that's what we do for a living.
Right, right. And I mean, it's interesting, like quality has to be table stakes as part of what you're saying. But do you also, for folks who are smaller players and becoming thought leaders, there has to be some kind of operationalized output, right? Otherwise, your reputation is not going to build over time. You yourself just have, I mean, if folks go to Kate's pages on, for example, the university that she where she teaches, Tennessee, there's just like the depth of scroll that has to take place to get through the number of your publications is just, I mean, it's amazing. So what is your suggestion for folks who are in that position in terms of quality? Yes, has to be there, but in terms of operationalizing cadence and volume of output, what's your take there?
Yeah, I mean, you got to start somewhere. I have a long list because I've been doing it for 20 years. Right? And so, and then you grow on it. So the original piece of work that we did had originally we did the original research between 2003 and 2009. That generated one book. All right. And so between 2009 and 2025, I have 8 books. So the more you do, the better you get at it. And so you have to start with something. And so you don't have to start with this big, huge problem that you're trying to research. Take it down a notch. And one thing I would say is that if you don't have, kind of high quality research and it's more of an opinion piece, because I think a lot of people call themselves thought leaders and they really just have an opinion, a LinkedIn opinion article,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Call it an opinion article. Like it's okay. New York Times, for example, has op-eds. It's an opinion piece. You can be an expert practitioner and have an opinion, and you could have done something good in one area, but don't call it, something more than it is. You know, own I'm an expert and here's an opinion or here's something I've done versus what I like about, you pick up a McKinsey piece and it's got rigor behind it. You pick up something produced by, the typical university, especially a research based, a larger university, there's some rigor behind it. And I'd like to see the smaller individual contributors chunk off, just start with one thing or go, while you're working on your one thing, do opinion pieces. Be a be out there in terms of being an expert, and work on your craft, to do one thing, one smaller thing good. And once you get that one thing done, it's like a book, right? The first one's the hardest one to do. And you get better and you get better. And they're like books are easy now. Like I can spin out a book in 6 months.
Seriously?
It's yeah, because
It's
my
stunning.
research, it's
Yeah.
not like trying to go, here's a book and here's a book and here's a book. Here's our research. I use an analogy of a starfish. So if our main research is the body of the starfish, we're just growing legs. So for example, my latest book is on dispute prevention, and it was published by the American Bar Association. What we've done is taken some of the case studies that we have, invested in these big, these trading partner relationships, and I teamed with 3 attorneys, one being at the Institute for Conflict Prevention and Resolution. So it's a nonprofit for arbitrators and mediators. And so we teamed with them and said, hey, here's this work that we're doing. How do we translate this into the legal community? And so it wasn't like brand new information. It's information that we had that was tailored towards business people that we wanted to message towards the legal community because so much of what we know when people apply the concepts we do, they don't have disputes. So if we know they don't have disputes, why isn't the legal community teaching some of these tricks and tools and techniques? And so easy to write that book, about 6 months of hardcore writing, and then it goes into the publication piece. So that's like so it's a total year. But just to draft the book and get it out and bounce it back and forth with the other 3 authors, 6 hard months. We started writing that in January and we submitted it in the end of June to the publisher, and then it went through its publication cycle. But it's not brand new research. If you want to do that, yeah, then that takes a lot of time. So I would tell the smaller entrepreneur, organization, or individual, start to work on that thing that you're an expert at and treat it like a starfish, let it grow legs.
Yeah.
In the
Yeah.
short term, if you want to get your name out there, go on LinkedIn, try to pitch a New York Times op-ed. Hard as heck to get in, right? But go in and try to do that, but call it an opinion piece, an opt-in.
Right. So build your individual brand
Build your brand.
well through these opinion pieces or commentary, whatnot,
Exactly.
while you're engaging in your more substantive research. And just out of curiosity, I know you said earlier that books are sort of out of favor. We're actually seeing a resurgence of interest in books. Everybody wants to write a book now. There's like
Well, so I think
like
everyone wants to write a book.
so much digital, so much digital content now that people want the tangible, sort of long form, even the optics of having written a book. Do you see any of that? Like
Yeah.
writing
So,
books over a long period of
yeah,
time?
so this is interesting. There's an incredible interest in thought leaders wanting to write books.
Oh yeah, well, writing it is a whole different thing. I mean, yeah,
It's reading the book. So are you seeing a trend that people want to actually read the book, or that people want to write a book because they are a thought leader? So, if a book is like the new business card, or it's a one-up white paper.
yeah,
And so, yes, I absolutely see a massive increase. I mean, this is the whole hybrid publishing, where you can go to and this is makes me sad a little bit, right? Is because it's so easy. You can go to Amazon and self-publish. And now, though, there are legitimate, good. I'm going to self-publish my next book, by the way, that I'm working on, which will be a first for me. My others are all with traditional publishers. Um, but anyone can just go pop up a bad book on Amazon. It's easy, right? Or hybrid publishing, which can give you a really pretty, gorgeous book that maybe you had a ghostwriter.
right,
Yeah,
right.
exactly. Yeah. So I had some idea, so the publishing world has made it really easy to write books, and that means it's really easy to write bad books.
Yes.
And so I'm a big fan of traditional publishers because they weed through all the bad stuff. That's the role they have, is they're not going to publish something bad.
Mm.
And so as a consumer of thought leadership, it becomes, I think, very difficult. Oh, look at this great book. And it's like, yeah, that's not a great book, right? And the typical book, I just was doing some stats on this for self-publishing. The average self-published book is 150 books. And I guarantee you, yeah. Well, the average book in general. So when I first did my first book in 2010, I asked, and Paul Gray McMillan is my publisher, which is what's called professional books. So kind of more the academic community, not a trade book. So you wouldn't see my books in bookstores,
Yeah.
um, because they're kind of specialist books, not academic, but not, in a bookstore. Um, a typical book in 2010, a good book, was 500 copies. So I don't believe there is a resurrection of people reading books. I think that there is a lot of people writing books so they can say, look, I'm a thought leader and here's my book. Yeah. And actually here Christina said, I work for Springer Nature. Yes. Yes. Look, the average industry monographs sell 300 copies. By the way, Christina, I've sold 32,000 books for Paul Graves Springer Nature. So yay, right? So I'm rocking it for those guys. Um,
So, Kate, speaking of writing all these books and ghostwriting, I'm kind of interested in your leverage model as a as an academic and how much leverage you get from sort of, I don't know, research assistants and so forth at a university versus just having to having to do a lot yourself, or at the other extreme, being in a large organization where there's a big publishing support system at the center. How does that work?
it's all over the board.
Yeah.
right? And so early on, we had funded research from my research. So the Department of Defense and Air Force gave us a big chunk of money and said, I have this problem. Please go study it. And was around performance-based contracts specifically for logistics contracts. So you buy a GE engine, and then you have all the maintenance for it. So those maintenance contracts for those engines are $10 billion. And they're not, and it's not that GE's to blame, right? So why is the GE 404 engine maintenance contract in Jacksonville, Florida so successful? And working with the GE engine manufacturer and Tinker Air Force Base is awful. Is it that GE's it's the same GE, it's the same engine maintenance. So the contract is the difference, right? How we work with that trading partner makes a difference. So in the early days, I had a big pot of money. Today, I don't have a big pot of money, right? And
Yeah.
so every university is different, every faculty member is different. So a lot of them, the faculty are really bootstrapping. They don't
Yeah.
have funded research. They're trying to go out and slog through doing this stuff. So this is why I'm always kind of an advocate for the smaller entrepreneur, because an individual faculty person is almost like more of a smaller entrepreneur. They don't have the backing of a big research fund or all the people behind them.
Mhm.
And so to me, if we can get the standards out and help teach smaller entrepreneurs, it's going to benefit universities as well, especially the faculty members who don't have a big budget. Now sometimes we have big budgets. That's a great thing. My original research had a great big budget. It was fantastic. But when that research went away, I've then taken and continued to build on that.
Yeah.
Because there was no books written between 2003 and 2009. No white papers. We just slowly started to build on that. And the more that you produce, the more that you attract other people, the more for example, the ABA book, those are three lawyers, right? And so now you can multiply by through collaboration.
Right, right. So collaborative authorship is one way to multiply the sort of creation part of the value chain. There's a question here on spreading the message, so the dissemination and promotion end of the value chain. And the question is, how well connected do you have to be? And do you work with consulting agencies in order to get the message out?
Yes, to some extent. So more boutiques, but EY is actually one of the consulting organizations that has embraced our concepts. So remember, go back to we research and we teach. So a partner at EY in Stockholm, actually, Magnus Kuchar, heard about our work. He came, he actually sent a consultant, senior consultant to our exec ed class. Said, go check out this stuff. This is, I think this is really interesting. I've read this book. So we had a couple of EY consultants come. They took that back. The partner came himself and he goes, this is really interesting. And so they became a consulting arm that actually goes out because they're trained in our methodology. Remember, we have a certification program. They're trained in our methodology. They go out and they consult on our methodology. That's going to further build the momentum for what it is. So we love consultants. Most of the consultants who follow us are smaller boutiques.
Yeah.
They're trying to be the thought leaders themselves, but haven't necessarily produced thought leadership, but they're kind of tagging on to our work. And they become, in essence, kind of like field-based researchers, because as they're going out bringing the vested concept to partnerships that they have, right? Then we go, wow, this is interesting. I want to study that one. So, for example, I've got one now that I'm looking at, probably, hopefully one day make a case study of it, but it's a small boutique out of the Netherlands that work with Shell for their their gas fields, not oil, but their gas fields were causing earthquakes. and huge political. No, it was not good.
Yeah,
I mean, you
right,
can Google it. You can Netherlands earthquakes, oil fields, shell. It's public information. So they used our methodology through a boutique specialist who was out there saying, "Hey, I'm on the pointy end of the stick in trading partner relationships in the Netherlands." And we use this thing called Vested out of the University of Tennessee. Shell was very interested, came to them, and they actually helped, they did the consulting for that. And now they come to our classes, right? So they've taken our classes. And after about 3 years, I like to go back in to work with those organizations to then try to do case studies. What worked well? What were the results? So that field-based work that the consultants do really helps feed us so that then I can go in and know that they're doing stuff. But usually they're coming to our classes. So the consultants out there consulting, the people are coming to our courses. And so it really helps that idea get legs.
right. So here's a question, and I'm just mindful of time. There's an AI question in the chat that I want to get to, but part of what you keep referring to is this interval between 2003 and 2009 when you did the majority of your substantive work, and then it sounds like you're updating it and refining it and iterating on it continuously through this client application, or what you would not call client, but applicate real world application of the research. I'm interested in part just because the world right now is so dynamic,
Mhm.
right? And the supply chain landscape in particular, I mean, it is volatile, right? Geopolitical risk, the world is uncertain. And, in one way, as we were talking about before this webinar started, it has like all this destabilization of traditional trade arrangements has really brought for, it's who knows how it will turn out for humanity, but for it's kind of brought sexy back to supply chain. Everybody's
Yeah,
interested in it and
yeah.
everybody's talking about it because it's at the forefront of business people's minds. Um, but but that also means that like folks are looking for help quickly and to get up to speed quickly, and speed is not, as you noted, speed and sort of concision are not necessarily traits that one associates with universities, right? The universities are about
Yeah.
slow thinking in the convent convent
Yeah, yeah.
formulation, right? Rigor, enduring insights, and so forth. So have you felt pressure to get research to market more quickly, given the volatility in the broader landscape?
You know what? I think there is pressure to publish. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't have tenure, there's pressure to publish in those A academic journal articles,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So yes. And so in that case, um, but it's interesting because I think the reason why I've been able to have speed to market after that initial stuff because I had that initial block of work, right? And the concepts and after that it's growing little legs on my starfish, right? And so we're just jettisoning out. So
And
this
you find that that research holds, it has endured
absolutely.
over time. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, for example, the Canadian government came to us and said, "Gosh, I really love to do a vested deal. I love the concepts you're teaching, but we're a public government entity and we have to go to bid." Because up until then, everyone that had done vested deals did what we call flips. They take existing relationships and restructure them, which, by the way, is fantastic if you're a researcher, because now I have the same people, the same thing before and after. It's brilliant, right? And I was like, well, I think you can do it, but let's go in and look at your laws. Let's look at your different things. And so we took and created a process for them to take the vested methodology and overlay it on top of their bid. That to me was kind of applied research, right? It's not original, it's not new. It's like, hey, how do you do this in this area? Well, then EY picked it up and said, we've got some companies that would like to do bids. So they began to do pilots. And we call it a request for partner. Instead of a request for proposal, it's a request for partner. And then in the Netherlands, they've done it. So now we have a sample size where we have enough companies. I can now take that and go, this works. Now let
Right.
me write a white paper on it. Let me write a second generation white paper on it. And so you can build on that through, working with the, putting things into practice. So I look at one of the little starfishes we've grown. That was kind of a big one, but we have some little ones that we've grown. Little legs right off our starfish. So if I'm a smaller entrepreneur, you don't have to tackle the big, hairy, wicked problem,
Yes.
right? You can pick off one of these little things. Tariffs. Go be
Yep.
an expert on tariffs. Make your
Yep.
name, right?
Yep.
Pull in some stuff there. And so it's just making sure that however big your thought leadership is, that you put, you don't have to have the rigor of an academic university, but you have to at least put out something that's credible. Otherwise, it goes back to the comment that was in the thing where commercial organizations don't feel as trusted. Well, they don't feel as trusted because there's a lot of this stuff is crap, right? And it's made worse in the book publication because if I got rejected by a real publisher, I can just go toss my crap on Amazon.
Right.
That
Right.
doesn't do the world a good thing. Not
No.
that Amazon isn't great, because now some good people, authors, are going into Amazon, right? But it's taken a while for that, and there's no standards. There's no, you write a book.
Right. It's heterogeneous. Yeah, it's
Exactly.
heterogeneous. Okay, so we are actually at or slightly over time. I want to very, 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 very quickly ask you, just because it's 2025 and I can't not ask you this, and also was in the chat, how is AI changing what you do, and do you see academic researchers adopting AI at any kind of scale? What do you make of like the AI phenomenon in your particular context?
Yeah, well, I have to admit I'm a slow adopter, but I have, I do like asking it, like, give me 10 things, give me the top 10, whatever, and then I'll go and kind of look at that. So I think most from what my little sample size of the people I know are starting to lean into it. And I have a son who's in college. He's 20, he's a sophomore. And one of his professors absolutely embraces AI, and one says, "Oh my gosh, you're evil, you'll fail, don't ever, whatever." And I think we should lean into it. I think it's an excellent tool. But it's also, if for experts on AI, it's a race to the middle, and that's not thought leadership,
Yeah.
because it's going in looking at a certain thing. So you can gather stuff, but you have to use it as a launch pad.
Yes, right,
Like one of my
right. To
favorite things
drive the
when I'm
discourse
doing
forward,
titles.
whereas it's backward
Yeah.
looking. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do is when I'm doing titles and I had to do something for like a keynote speech and I had to have 7 words. And I'm like, 7 words. All right, take this and give me 7 words for this industry. Give me 10 examples of a title. Brilliant, right?
Yes,
I
right.
do think it's fantastic. It can be a great tool, and I think people need to learn how to use it, but learn how to use it right. Because again, it goes back. There's a lot of people that don't know how to use it, and then you know, stuff's getting, and especially as someone who writes stuff, your stuff gets plagiarized.
Right. For
Easy,
sure. Yeah, the ingestion into the LLMs is a
not
big,
good.
big
Yeah.
issue. Yeah. Okay, we are over time, Kate. What a pleasure.
Awesome. Well, thank you. This has, just been a good discussion, and that's what I want to do is just have a discussion today, just to bring a different perspective, to how, the importance of disseminating and getting quality research out, even if you're not this big McKinsey or university. You know what? I work at a big university. My stuff is boots, after my original stuff, all of those little legs, that's all just on me, right? I don't have the army behind me.
Yeah. Yep. I'm sure many in our audience can relate to this lens that you are approaching, looking at thought leadership through. So super helpful to have you. And again, for our audience, thanks for being with us. For more on upcoming events hosted by the Global Thought Leadership Institute, including future webinars like the one you see here in August, Please visit the APQC website at apqc.org/GTLI. You can also subscribe to our weekly GTLI newsletter for highlights of the best thought leadership of the moment. Curation always a plus, as we were just talking about. There's a glut of content out there and not all of it is good. So good to be pointed to the best. And of course, again, follow the Global Thought Leadership Institute on LinkedIn. Have a great day or evening and be well.